Chapter 33 to 37. Krasla and Chrisley. They are nervous. I could read the nerves in their facial expressions and gestures. In particular, Krasla was looking at me with tough eyes, but his body was trembling slightly. His eyes were filled with strength in an attempt to protect Chrisley. It was ludicrous to go against the dungeon master, but it was an instinctive behavior as a brother. Anyway, Krasla's actions weren't over the limit. He didn't show his teeth towards me. It is due to the slave's mark. The auction house had imprinted a seal on his body and soul. The moment he tried to oppose the dungeon master, his body would experience unbearable pain. Even Krasla couldn't relax knowing that. Greetings to the dungeon master. The 50 dark elves simultaneously kneeled. Are you the chief? I asked an adult who was in front of the dark elves. He was the only elderly, white-haired figure. The aging dark elf nodded. Yes, dungeon master. Your name? Julium. Is everybody from the same village? That's right. Although they were sold separately in the auction, Krasla and Chrisley are also from the same village. I touched my jaw. The dark spirits usually paid something in exchange for the auction items. It was how the spirits filled up their auction items. In some cases, they were caught by the corrupted, but anyway, it was very rare for an entire auction to pass through an auction. In addition, Krasla and Chrisley were sold separately at the auction. There must be something important about the village, or there were circumstances that made them contract with the dark spirits. I was silent for a while before Julium said, The true vampire clan took an interest in Chrisley and there was no way to escape. Therefore, we made a contract with the dark spirits. I didn't ask anything. Dungeon Master is someone who will lead all of us. It is natural to describe the situation. They gave me the explanation without even asking. The true vampire clan. I recalled the features of a vampire. They had hot blood. They consumed the yin of women in order to try and cool their blood. But they had targeted Chrisley. Is it because of the Ice Dragon's curse? Ice Dragon's curse. It was a powerful restraint that ran through the veins. Julium's eyes widened. You know about it? The magic is so strong that it is impossible not to notice. A moderate cover. I easily figured things out due to mind's eye. There was no need to bring up distrust. That's right. Krasla has the blood of a true demonic dragon, but Chrisley has barely survived since she was born. Nevertheless, how could we hand her over to the vampires? They either didn't know or deliberately omitted it. The latter. Chrisley had the best blood of the true demonic dragon running through her. That part was purposely omitted. I got a strong impression of a desire to hide and protect her. I snorted. An entire village wouldn't enter a contract with the dark spirits just to escape some vampires. It was to ensure that Chrisley living inside the dark elf village would be protected from the vampires. It was omitted, but it wasn't in order to deceive me. Although it definitely wasn't true loyalty. It would be very challenging to swear allegiance to a person they didn't know. I wanted to make Krasla and the dark elves follow me deep in their bones. In order to do this, I needed to know where to place the line. Anyway, I hold the key. I recalled lightning god technique. Yuanhe had been blessed by the spirit of lightning and gained the ability to use lightning. If I used lightning god technique, then it might be possible to unblock the yin veins. I had 90 magic power, so it would be possible if I had the power of lightning. There was no law that the blocked veins couldn't be fixed. Time is a problem. I need to extend her life with the elixir. Chrisley's life force was exhausted, so it was a situation where she could die tomorrow. But I needed to use the time to learn lightning god technique. The thing that could buy that time was the elixir. It cost 100,000 PT and was an absolute remedy. Checked my points soon after returning from the auction house. I needed to take steps to buy the elixir. They must have signed the contract in order to obtain the elixir. They probably just used the vampires as a pretext to obtain the elixir. Chrisley was a significant presence to them, so they sold themselves to the dark spirits. The whole town had signed a contract just to protect Chrisley. Of course, this was just something I predicted. I wiped the thoughts from my head and said, Do you want me to pity you? No. It is just one of those things that happened. Julium shook his head. I smirked and said, Then from now on, you will be members of my dungeon. Are you aware of what you should be doing? Stop the humans coming to invade the dungeon? There seemed to be some basic education. That's right. Right now, fearless human beings have started climbing up this dungeon. Then wait at a given location and prepare to defend that place. That place is the 15th floor should be reasonable. You will consult with Yihi and the dwarves. I've only set up the ecology up to the 5th floor, but placing the dark elves on the 6th floor would collapse the balance. The current awakened could only defeat low-grade creatures, so it was reasonable to place them on the 15th floor. Yihi flew over and sat down on my shoulder. Then she laid both hands on her waist. Ahem, you hear that right? I am Yihi. Listen carefully to my words. The fairy of the dungeon core. Julium lowered his body. Yihi raised her nose even higher. Yihi, you are assigned to the 15th floor. I have other work to do. Yes, Yihi flew in front of the dark elves. Then she said with a sinister expression on her face, follow me. Yihi will be your guide. You guys, you should be well prepared. Yihi isn't very nice. I won't pamper you. If you make a large fuss while working, then I will throw you to the orcs. We will keep that in mind. Julium and the rest answered mechanically. A good attitude. Yihi continued with a smile. But hopefully the work will go well. I don't want Master to scold me. Compensation? Well, I should give you something. Tell me what you want. Saying that before working, Yihi seemed to have widened her mindset. Julium spoke carefully. Then, can we receive an elixir? What? Elixir? That's pretty expensive. But I think that the Dungeon Master can buy it. Well, you're right. Dungeon Master is great. He can drink an elixir every day like it was water. He can even bathe in elixirs. Yihi lied without even blinking. Julium stuttered with surprise. Tea truly great, I realized from the auction house, compared to the attitudes of the Grand Dukes. But why do you want an elixir? An elixir is required in order to improve Chrisley's status. The one behind the large dark elf in the back? Yes, her body has been very weak since she was born. The ice dragon's curse. The strong yin was a curse that meant she would die before 20 years passed. An elixir wouldn't cure it, but it would improve her state. Yihi thought for a moment before smacking her lips together. I can't give you an elixir. Yihi doesn't have permission for this. Do you know how hard it is to make 100,000 points? Points don't just emerge from the ground. Then the dungeon master has to approve it? This whole place is Master's dungeon. You guys are no different. You must make yourself useful to Master. If Master approves, then you can get the elixir. In contrast, if you make Master angry, then Yihi doesn't know what will happen. Do you want something other than the elixir? No, the elixir is necessary. Then should Yihi give some advice? You are very clever, so we will listen. Yihi smiled with satisfaction. The kobolds and goblins were stupid, so the dark elves were quite good in the eyes of the fairy. Okay, listen carefully to Yihi's words. First, Dungeon Master hates things that go round and round. If you want the elixir, then go and tell him directly. Of course, you should prepare something equivalent in return. If you just say, give me an elixir, without giving anything, then Dungeon Master will plug his sword into your asses. The dwarves were used to jokes like this. However, Yihi's words were very shocking to the dark elves. Where will he plug the sword? Didn't you listen to Yihi's words? Ah, no, the sword. So he will plug the sword. Yes, and unlike Yihi, Dungeon Master will be annoyed if you repeat the same things. I recommend that you speak articulately. Thank you. You have been very helpful. Yihi. So you should listen to Yihi's words. If you follow Yihi's words, then you will have no problem getting the elixir. While Yihi was leading the dark elves to a higher floor, I pulled out the Lightning God Technique skill from my bag. In this life, this is my first attack skill. I only had skill combination and mind's eye, but Lightning God Technique was an attack skill. Name, Lightning God Technique. Description. A recipe from someone studying lightning. Lightning can be freely handled up to a 12-star cultivation. This was the description of Lightning God Technique. Of course, it wouldn't be entirely learned until he had all 12 stars. Furthermore, the rating of Lightning God Technique was unique. It was an excellent rating for such a vague explanation. However, there were many reasons why it was necessary to become familiar with the Lightning God Technique. The power of lightning god technique could help Chrisley as well as allow him to adjust and repair Yuanhai's passive. And maybe I might be able to get my hands on a special achievement. Gain. Lightning god technique U has been learned. Although the accomplishment is low, you've succeeded in forming 1 million watts, 1 million watts of electric energy in your body. Electric power has been added to the status window. The messages that continuously popped up. The first attack skill, Lightning God Technique, has been added. Good. I felt a strange sensation. I took a few deep breaths as it felt like a snake was coiling around my body. Then the power of the Lightning God Technique settled in my body. Chick! Static electricity sparked around my body. Not yet. This had a unique rating for a reason. Yuanhai could also cause sparks. I learned a few things from experimenting with her. I closed my eyes. Lightning God Technique. It was a snake. It was very sensitive and moved slowly but efficiently. Once loose inside my body, it licked my flesh with its tongue. It was still in the first place where it entered my body. Then it looked around the perimeter. The snake paced for a while before choosing a safe path and beginning to move. It moved between my feet and my head as it caused the passages to widen. After a while, it became hungry and would roam the bloodstream, swallowing up magic power. After it swallowed until it was full, the snake made its home just below my belly button. And as if it was excreting, it changed the magic power scattered around to fit its home. The original magic power gained the property of lightning. I allowed it to move freely. However, I was slightly worried. The magic power flowing through the bloodstream, it was also linked to the heart of the Hell Monarch. Rather, it didn't even come close to my heart. It was like the presence of something scary had chased it away on purpose. Still, the passages were clearly laid well. In the future, I would be able to use the Lightning God technique more efficiently. Lightning God Dan has successfully been created. 2 stars can be used to communicate with Lightning God, but a 3rd star is needed to form a Dan. 4 million watts, 4 minowatts of electric power has been born in your body. Lightning God. Was Lightning God the name of the snake? I started laughing. It was indeed a grand name. I contemplated the lightning god that had fallen asleep. The magic power in my belly button area had the property of lightning. This was the only Dan. The electric power is 4 million watts. The electric power seemed to increase with every star. After roaming around my body and absorbing 4 times the energy from my magic power, it had fallen asleep. A single Dan had been created. It is tired. Magic power conversion. It was no wonder why the snake was physically and mentally fatigued. But then I opened my eyes. I should check the rest of the items. There was paranormal and wrath left. I should start. At the very least, I needed to check them. I pulled out paranormal that was in the shape of a ring. It was a unique rating and had an option that could reverse the situation. Name, paranormal, U, description. A ring that randomly gives one of 5 different blessings. All stats +2 for 1 hour. Recovery, magic power +5 for 30 minutes, grant a powerful attraction and infinite energy. One of these blessings can be given once a day. In particular, the all stats +2, magic power +5, and recovery blessings were like sweet honey. The infinite energy and charm was useless, but there was a fairly high probability of receiving 3 out of 5. I immediately placed paranormal on my left-hand index finger. There wasn't a particular reason for sticking it on the index finger. I would just be reminded of the blessings whenever I saw the index finger. The index finger was used to indicate direction. I had some distinct goals, and I would be reminded of them every time I looked at paranormal. The size of the ring also fit tightly to my left index finger. Paranormal. The 4 letters in my mouth, all the conditions were met, so I said the name of the item. Soon a message window told me what blessing was given. One of the 5 blessings of paranormal, endless stamina, has been applied. An infinite amount of energy will be received throughout the day. With this ability, it isn't impossible to get the title King of Virility. I was lost for words. Blood naturally shot to below my abdomen. The blessing of paranormal even had that intention. There is even a title. I was still a man. It would be false to say that I didn't have sexual desires. It existed moderately, but desire didn't make me go crazy like an animal. It's just the thought of such a title made me nervous. I need to work on it in the future. A title was difficult to obtain. Even a low-grade title could help raise the stats. After thinking about this challenging opportunity, I took out the last item, Wrath. Wrath, an epic grade item, and one of the 7 sins. It was extraordinary just looking at it. The black handle didn't reflect the light, and the end curved like a scimitar. However, it wasn't a scimitar, a thick sword approximately 1 meter long. It didn't seem like a long sword or a bastard sword. Really mysterious. What had Oswin aimed for when making a sword with this appearance? I used Mind's Eye to read the description once again. Name, Wrath, epic set item. Description, the last piece made by the mythical blacksmith Oswin that even the gods opposed. Characterized by these 7 deadly sins, the evil contained in it was so powerful that Oswin reportedly went crazy. Wrath, such pure evil. Options, Strength +7, epic grade skill Wrath is available once every 7 days. It raised stats, but there was also a skill attached. Having 2 options attached was quite rare, plus it was a set item. It was absolutely unbelievable. I watched the Wrath skill. Then an explanation for Wrath came up. Skill, Wrath, epic. Strength, magic power, agility, and stamina will rise as you enter Berserk mode. However, there will be a significant decline in intelligence. Throughout the week, intelligence will gradually recover while you are caught in the desire to destroy. In other words, it was a skill that significantly increased my physical abilities, but intelligence would drastically drop. It would recover over a week, but it was unknown what symptoms would occur. What's more, I already had a penalty of -10 due to the auction. I need to use the skill. I didn't care. Low intelligence didn't mean low mental strength. Intelligence just had a secondary guiding role. If I was caught up in the destructive urge, then I could escape if necessary with my willpower. Furthermore, it wasn't a permanent condition. It might produce irreversible results over a short period of time, but this was my dungeon. Who would make an attempt on my life here? It wasn't an option for now. Wrath. The 2 characters were captured in my mouth. At the same time, strength, stamina, agility, and magic power has risen by 8. Intelligence has reduced by 20. The Wrath state has taken over, defended against 15%. Low intelligence has failed to defend against it. My memory cut out. I opened my eyes. At that moment, a painful headache could be felt. There was also a worn-out feeling in my jaws. I could barely raise my neck from the pain. I was forced to drip some saliva. The entire top floor had been completely destroyed. Yihi's body was trembling as she stared at me with fear. How many days have passed? Yihi was wrong, Master. In the future, I won't fall asleep or bother Master. So forgive me. Don't hurt Yihi, Yihi said with tearful eyes and a runny nose. I stiffened. Damn, that state was more effective than I imagined. I never thought I would lose consciousness. My body didn't move to my will. It was unpleasant. The appetite for destruction had taken over. Something had happened in order to make Yihi terrified of me. Yihi, I will not harm you. Yihi sneaked a glance at me. Really? You really won't hurt Yihi? I was testing a skill and the state took over. It wasn't my intention to make the surroundings like this. Fortunately, I didn't touch the dungeon core. It must have been instincts. The Wrath skill suppressed my consciousness, but my instincts still remain. I sighed and pulled out the Flower of Eternity. Take this. It is a flower I purchased at the auction house. It won't wither without water and will grow beautifully. Hing? Yihi sniffled as she carefully lifted the Flower of Eternity. She had a spirit body, but came from the dungeon core. This was why she could exercise physical force. I said afterwards, "Do you know how many days I have been in that state?" It has been 7 days. And Yihi has fearfully spent that time underneath the dungeon core. I was really sad that Master was going to hurt Yihi. I will prevent this from happening in the future. Yes, Master. Yihi answered while wiping at her runny nose and tears. I clicked my tongue. My thoughts towards Wrath were too shallow. It wasn't easy to regain my mind in that state. I have to be a little more careful. I hadn't expected that my consciousness would be entirely taken away. In the future, it seemed like I needed to move more carefully. I had rushed into it due to feeling impatient. I needed to make sure never to repeat this mistake. It also lowered intelligence. No matter if it was a secondary role, having it too low wasn't good. I frowned and checked my status window. Name, Randolph Brigzeal. Occupation Demon Earl Dungeon Master. Title: Indomitable Warrior. XU all stats +2. First to receive a fairy's blessing. U magic power 6 stats. Strength 79, intelligence 64 +2, agility 74 +2. Stamina 80, magic power 82, potential 379, 23 500. Electric power 4 megawatt uniqueness. Heart of the Hell Monarch has been transplanted. Full strength hasn't been fully opened. Skill combination are Mind's Eye XU, Lightning God Technique U, Wrath. A week had passed, and all my stats had recovered. The stats that fell from the auction penalty had also recovered. Due to the option attached to Wrath, strength had also increased by 7. The status window itself had no problems. I will refrain from using it unless it is an emergency situation. The real problem was the situation after activating the skill. Strength, agility, and stamina might rise, but intelligence fell instead. In that state, I couldn't even use Mind's Eye. I would just be like a mad warrior. Of course, there was a penalty, but the Wrath skill was very attractive. It was rare for a skill to increase abilities. The item itself increased strength by 7, and the rest of his physical abilities climbed by 8. When looking at just strength, that was a total rise of 15. The destructive power of that alone was enough to slash an ogre. Anyway, it was an absolute advantage in the area of close combat. But due to the state that couldn't be avoided, I had to refrain from using it unless the circumstances were special. And Master. The Dark Elf Krasla wanted to see Master a few days ago. I thought I was going to die, but should Yi-He call him? Yi-He, who was staring at the Flower of Eternity, suddenly spoke like she remembered something. I nodded my head. Call him. Right now I am fine. Yes, by the way, Master, you look very tired. Did you know that Yi-He was a little bit of a beekeeper? I can get delicious honey. You should drink honey when feeling tired. A psychic. Her attitude quickly changed from before. Her appearance became more joyful after finding out I had regained my sanity. This was why it was hard to hate the fairy of the dungeon core. Yet I took the self-righteous path and ignored her during my previous life. Bring it. Yes, Master, please wait a minute. Yi-He will mix a delicious blend. Then I will call Krasla. Yes, Yi-He then went to harvest the honey. She was still holding the Flower of Eternity tightly. I gazed after her and thought about Krasla. It must be about her. I had expected Krasla to come sooner or later. I couldn't meet him for a week, so he must be worried sick. I wanted what he will offer in exchange for the elixir. It was interesting. No matter how unique Krasla and Chrisley were, nothing in this world was free. Lulu, the secret garden, lush grass, trees, and flowers. This had a different atmosphere to the dungeon and was the place that Yi-He prized the most. While the dungeon master was committing brutal violence, she had completed it. She had used points to change the structure and topography of the dungeon, as well as decorations. A corner of the garden. Yi-He arrived at the bee farm in a corner of the garden while humming. Master. 2 big weapons. Paranormal had given him a blessing of infinite energy, causing his virility to shoot up. The 2 weapons she was referring to was his sword and his organ in his lower extremities. Yi-He sang a strange song while diligently working on the bees. Hello? Delicious honey? The bees just shrugged in response. She wanted to tell that beekeepers that the dungeon master was now sane, but Yi-He didn't publicize the matter. Yi-He was his representative. La la. Her song wasn't over yet. Yi-He's gaze headed elsewhere. It was a linden tree in the center. It had a hole where bees were eagerly gathered. Yi-He pulled out one that was visible. Honey dripped down as Yi-He flew. Master has 2 weapons! Yi-He flushed as she visualized Dungeon Master's 2 imposing weapons after being taken over by the state. I frowned as I looked at Krasla in front of me. Absurd, and I sneered fiercely. As expected, Krasla had come to the top floor in order to appeal for an elixir. It was just a direct fastball, but Krasla's expression was serious. I know this is an unreasonable demand, but I, Krasla, really need the elixir. I will dedicate my entire body to Dungeon Master. Krasla kneeled down. Krasla's strength when it grew was truly worthy. If he faced one of the 12 dukes right now, then he could push them greatly. But there was a serious problem. Was his head just a decoration? I purchased Krasla so naturally that meant I could use him as I liked, yet he wanted to exchange himself for an elixir? a ridiculous joke that I never heard of before. Aren't you mistaken? You will assist me? Ha ha! It was impossible for such words to be okay. I was expecting a little bit more. In my past life, he had been one of the 100 strongest creatures. I had no doubt that he could show that type of capabilities, but he was greatly mistaken if he thought he could just offer his loyalty. It showed how shallow Krasla was. My power is comparable to a Death Knight or Dark Warrior. The ogres and even the vampires aren't a match for me. Hopefully, I will be a sword that Dungeon Master can use well. He listed his specifications. I didn't conceal my derision and asked, "Sword. So you are asking to be my sword? Then you can slay Julium and the entire village of Dark Elves here? What is that?" Krasla's eyes widened. He was already disqualified from his position as my sword. A sword needed to be wielded. It couldn't have any doubts. I scoffed and formed a cold expression. He dared lie to me. He said he didn't want Chrisley to be a victim of the vampires, so a contract was signed with the dark spirits. It is really ridiculous sophistry. Do you really think that I would believe him? A misunderstanding. It wasn't a lie. No? That's correct. Our village has relied on each other for many years. Chrisley's body in particular has been weak since birth. Ha! My body started shaking at Krasla's words. I opened up my magic power in order to pressure Krasla. In other words, I was telling him to change his attitude, or I will punish him. This wasn't something that could be solved with conversation. I had definitely given Krasla a lot of opportunities. It seemed he needed a proper education. I said with a little bit of anger, "Krasla, you have wasted your last chance. I offered you a favorable gesture, but you just spat it on the ground. Even if it was at the last moment, if you had given me the truth, then I would have believed in your loyalty." My eyes and voice was filled with rage. Anyone looking at me would know that I was really angry. The reason was Chrisley. I wanted her. She had the blood of a true demonic dragon, so her background wasn't ordinary. I didn't understand why they were so dedicated to Chrisley. If I could listen to the story, then I could get a relationship with a true demonic dragon or obtain some benefits from it. But Krasla had betrayed my expectations. It was ridiculous for a slave to hide something from his master. No matter how high the potential, I didn't need a slave like that. Education and a punishment was required. The slave mark meant he could die with one word, but that was too dull. Listen, Krasla, this is a weapon. Use it to try and stop me, but if you can't do that, then be prepared for the mass genocide of the Dark Elves. My hand squeezed wrath. Krasla was a demonic lancer, so I offered him a long red spear. It had an option of increasing the owner's abilities to a total of 362, but wrath caused my total stats to be over 400. There was a difference of at least 40. I had the upper hand when just looking at the physical abilities. I also had an extensive amount of combat knowledge. No matter what, Krasla wasn't my opponent. Krasla was also aware of this fact. Sweat dripped down his face as he swallowed his saliva. Tension was evident in his eyes. That is good, but his skills? Could he show something more than his potential? I ran while holding my sword out. Giving time to someone strong or weak was a luxury that I never learned. I always tried my best to smash the enemy. Chang, Krasla managed to lift his spear to block the sword. Krasla's body stumbled slightly from the explosive power. A single clash. Krasla judged that he couldn't face me in power, so he started moving faster. Skilled demon sprint. The spear seemed like a vortex as he tried to pressure me. It felt like several spears were simultaneously heading towards me. It was difficult to find the real one hidden in the dazzling movements. However, it was still insufficient. Demon Sprint had a rare skill rating. The skill wasn't enough to narrow the gap between their overwhelming abilities. Chang, tuck. I rolled and the red spear hit the ground. It was a simple task to determine where the spear would hit. Krasla looked at me with a dazed expression. He never imagined that I would identify his skill. It was proof that he had never met someone strong. Is this the end? At this level, you aren't worthy of being my sword. I snubbed Krasla. Krasla's fists clenched as he turned red and his eyes narrowed. It was like a reptile's eyes were looking at me. Black scales started to form on his face, and his teeth and nails started to change. Dragon Stampede. It was Krasla's skill with a unique rating. Grrr. Krasla made a sound similar to a beast. I was very curious about his state and used Mind's Eye. Name, Krasla, occupation, demonic lancer, title. Person with dragon's blood, R, strength +4. Stats, strength 74 +4, intelligence 59, agility 65, stamina 83, magic power 7, potential 358 + 437. Uniqueness, a slave inscription is carved on the body. The skill Dragon Stampede has been triggered. After all previously learned skills have been used, the racial special skill can be activated. After Dragon Stampede is completed, the active skills will return to its original state. Skill Dragon's Breath, U, Hard Scales, R, Sharp Attack, R, Danger Detection, XR. His abilities hadn't changed, instead the skills had changed. The existing Dragon Stampede, U, and Demon Sprint, R, was gone and had been replaced with 4 other skills. An unusual skill. I had never fought Krasla in my previous life. I had only heard rumors. This was the first time I had seen the skill Dragon's Stampede. The previous learned skill had triggered some special skills. It was good if a skill could be evolved, but it was useless if they didn't know how to use it. Dragon Stampede was an ambiguous skill. I need to be careful of Dragon's Breath. The rest is just melee combat. Melee combat. I was the best in that field. I laughed and raised Wrath. At that moment, Krasla moved. I took a step back and wielded Wrath. Krasla showed a tremendous reaction rate as he avoided the sword while moving forward. It was like he had perceived the movement before I made it. Danger detection skill. It became clearer after several more attacks. Danger detection was always on, but it wasn't universal. Even without the skill, I was able to read all of Krasla's movements, but Krasla only relied on his senses to read my movements. The difference was very huge. The sword was thrust indefinitely. One miss would be an irreversible wound. Poke! Cuck! Wrath was thrust deep in his chest. Krasla shouted as blood gushed out. Not yet. But Krasla's eyes were still full of fighting spirit. Krasla grabbed my sword and took a significantly deep breath. There was a pulsating sound as a significant amount of magic power was detected. I soon realized the identity of the magic power. Dragon's Breath. I sucked the magic power that Krasla gathered into my mouth. Kwajijijik. Lightning God technique moved due to the disturbance in magic power. The Dragon's Breath had a fire attribute, while I let the lightning attribute flow through my sword. The 2 different types of magic power clashed inside my body. The skill wasn't cancelled, but it ran rampant. The aftermath affected Krasla. Smoke started to rise from all openings in his body. A large amount of blood started flowing. The reason he hadn't died instantly was the dragon's blood. I pulled back the blood-stained wrath. I said calmly and cruelly, I won. The 50 dark elves received my call and went up to the top floor. They stared with wide eyes and disbelieving expressions at the tattered Krasla. Krasla was called the clan's ultimate warrior. It was unbelievable. Krasla was lying unconscious on the floor. It was obvious from his state that he was the only one who received significant damage. And I was sitting on top of Krasla's body while wearing a half-skull mask. You're late. It is great to see Dungeon Master. Julium identified the alarming atmosphere and kneeled down. The rest of the elves also took the same position. It doesn't look like everyone is here? Julium quickly answered. Chrisley's state has worsened, so she can't come up here. Please forgive us. I made it clear that all the dark elves were to come to the top floor. Isn't this the same as not listening to me? Julium's eyes filled with panic. That is impossible. Dungeon Master is our sky and owner. You tried to deceive me. Listen. I stood up and stared down at the dark elves. Listen to my words without any interruptions. I gave you many chances to tell the truth, but you seem intent on hiding it. To my disappointment, Krasla even showed a shameful appearance when fighting with me. He even disagreed with my commands. Why should I treat you guys nicely? You aren't even qualified to be called slaves. Gulp. The dark elves swallowed their saliva. The open magic power was effective in planting fear in them. The powerful magic power weighed down on their shoulders, and they couldn't even say excuses. The moment they tried to open their mouths, their necks seemed to be cut. They could only shake and bow their heads. It was what I intended. I also wore the skull mask to create this situation. I looked down at the dark elves and declared, "The sin will be paid with your lives." Wait a minute. Please wait a minute. Dungeon Master. Shortly after the declaration, Julium urgently raised his head from the floor. Most of the slaves were in a downwards posture, but I didn't show anything on my hardened face. Who gave you permission to speak? Well, I will tell you everything, so please judge us wisely. Kung, kung. Julium hit his forehead against the ground. Blood flowed down his face, but he didn't seem to care. Somehow, I could see his fierce struggle to survive. He realized that I wasn't lying. And indeed, it wasn't a lie. Krasla and Chrisley might have high value, but I had no regrets over the fate of the rest of the Dark Elves. Julium gazed at the other Dark Elves with sadness in his eyes. Then the previously fainted Krasla stretched out his hand towards Julium. No. Peek! I kicked Krasla in the stomach. Krasla's body flew a few meters before landing on the ground. Krasla was stunned once again. At the same time, there was a short but long silence. To the Dark Elves, it felt like 1 second or 1 minute had passed. It has to be a very important story. If it isn't good, then all of you, including Krasla and Chrisley, will be hurt. I said without any emotions. It was really uncommon for me to be merciful, despite becoming more magnanimous after going back. But I was curious about Chrisley's story. A true demonic dragon was a legendary creature. It could easily devour the devil. It was obvious that anyone who owned it would become similar to a devil. Julium finally opened his mouth. I only want to ask one more thing before that. Please, I'll allow it. Go ahead. My story will be a big help to Dungeon Master. Then can Chrisley become your eternal companion? Eternal companion. I had heard of it before. It had a similar to a wedding among the Dark Elves and was conducted through a special ritual. The ceremony would take place under the full moon as a naked man and woman entered. For a period of time before that, they would only consume water and would carve lines of blood on each other's bodies. During the ceremony, their bodies couldn't be mixed until it was completely purified of any wastes, and then the bond would come to fruition on the following full moon. The Dark Elves had strong vitals, so it was possible for them to starve for a month. The problem was that I didn't know why I should do that with Chrisley. There was no reason to do such a troublesome thing. You don't know your position, I said coldly, and Julium reacted urgently. He didn't wipe up the blood that spurted everywhere. That's not it. I was just thinking it would be a great help to Dungeon Master. The ceremony will help me? That's right. And in order to explain it, I need to tell you Chrisley's pedigree first. Go ahead. Chrisley was born from the Sun King Augenim and the Moon Queen Shilanim. She inherited the thick blood of the Dark Elves and the true demonic dragon. I knew from the title that Augen's blood flowed through her, but there was also the blood of the Dark Elves, the top Dark Elf among Dark Elves. I never imagined that her other parent would be linked to a top name among the high-class creatures. Then what about Krasla? Did he inherit the same blood? Technically not. He just had Augen's blood infused in him. He is Chrisley's guard. He doesn't know, but he was essentially created to protect Chrisley. I lightly nodded. Indeed, I had felt something strange from the title. Krasla's title was Person with Dragon's Blood. Augen's lineage running through his blood was lower. It could be understood through an infusion of blood. Now it seemed to fit the facts. Julium then continued, but the alignment of the two bloods are too different. In addition, the balance didn't match. The Sun King's blood was a little more dominant, so the remaining blood of the Moon Queen developed a curse. Really a true demonic dragon. It was enough to stop the characteristics of the Dark Elves. I could make a guess about the curse. That is the Ice Dragon's curse. That's right. The elixir is the only hope to improve it. But the elixir is a divine drink. It is an item that we don't even dare dream about. But due to the combination of Augenim and Shilanim's blood, Chrisley is destined for death, so there is no other way. Certainly, her life would have already ended once she was old enough. It was amazing that she was even still alive. Is that why you committed yourselves to the dark spirits? It was the only way remaining due to our lack of strength. We tried to obtain an elixir as collateral, but the dark spirits wouldn't budge. Instead, it told us how we could obtain an elixir. Use the points of a dungeon master in order to obtain the elixir. Reckless. An absurd gamble. In addition, the elixir would recover some of her strength, but it wasn't a solution. They knew that, but recklessly formed a contract for a chance at obtaining an elixir. I looked at Julian like he was stupid. We were desperate, the helplessness of not being able to do anything. We couldn't let go of the child that is the incarnation of the Dark Elves. Anyway, now Chrisley only has a lifespan of a few months left. This final gamble was based on the entire clan's desire. So, Dungeon Master, please take pity on Chrisley. The Dark Elves will devote themselves to your stuff there. So, Dungeon Master, please help Chrisley. Save the life of our child, please, please. Kung. Julian pounded his head into the ground. Ceremony? He was asking me to undertake the ceremony. It would tie Chrisley to me as well as improve the situation. If I agreed, then Julian and the Dark Elves would die for me with smiles on their faces. I thought for a moment. Chrisley had that type of history. This was a much bigger fish than I thought. If I can solve the problem of the energy imbalance, then both the Dark Elf and true demonic dragon nature can be expressed. Interesting. Simply put, I had to punch yin magic power into her blood. But that wasn't enough. The true demonic dragon's blood will burn up the yin magic power. Conversely, it can upset the balance in Chrisley's body and ignite a battlefield. It is an impossible task. Harmony? Yes, harmony is needed. This is called yin-yang. This was an essential part of the universe. If I mixed it without removing either of the yin or yang, then problems wouldn't occur. It was possible in theory. If I take advantage of the lightning god technique to harmonize the blood of the dark elf and true demonic dragon, then it isn't impossible. I need more research. Lightning god was nestled in my body. I had a sudden thought. The snake changed the property of the magic power to lightning. It was possible to neutralize the other two properties. And couldn't I eat the magic power? I might be able to use lightning god to take advantage of the results. Of course, I could only successfully absorb 10% if I embraced Chrisley, but that would be a considerable help. Time. Time is needed. My achievements in that skill hadn't reached the appropriate level. Anyway, this story was likely to be a great help to me. It was good that I heard it. I turned my attention back to them. It isn't a bad suggestion. If this is true, then I will help restore Chrisley. I will also review the ceremony. Then, eyes full of expectations turned towards me. I shook my head and betrayed their expectations. But I will say one thing. I have already declared your deaths, so. The hearts of the dark elves started pounding. Their lives could be taken with one word. I slowly opened my mouth. All of you will move on all fours and bark like a dog. Forget that you are dark elves. I will closely watch you for 1 month. During that time, if you act like people instead of dogs, then your lives will be taken. Conversely, if you perform wonderfully, then I will use the ritual to heal Chrisley. The Dark Elves needed to act like dogs for 1 month. This was a very good status upgrade. At least dogs were beasts with absolute loyalty to their owner. Other demons wouldn't have allowed them to live. Julian looked up at me with strange eyes. I said with a cold smile, "Bark, dogs don't talk." After a week, the dungeon's 15th floor. Bark, bark. Pant, pant, pant. Surprisingly, the Dark Elves fully adapted to being dogs. The 50 Dark Elves crawling on all fours was a spectacular sight. It was even reproduced when it came to the meals. This was the amazing result of their obsession with life and fulfilling their lives' desires. Chrisley was the only exception to that position. But she couldn't even walk, so it didn't matter. In contrast, Krasla rolled around like a loyal dog, and Krasla was the most passionate one among the Dark Elves about imitating a dog. "It is time to eat." Yihi brought the dog food. Yihi mixed in several different types of foods to look like dog food. Yihi was viciously monitoring them. Yihi liked Julian, but the Dungeon Master's command was absolute. Yihi persistently watched the Dark Elves day and night. Bark. Julian was the first to take initiative. He had to set an example. To be honest, I didn't think he would stay as a dog when he first started imitating it. Julian ate from the dog bowl, and then Krasla sat next to him. The food also looks good to Yihi. Next time, I'll give a living chicken as a specialty, the taste of biting its neck. Yihi's attitude changed, and she really treated them like pets. The faces of the Dark Elves darkened, but they didn't dare show it to Yihi. They just shook their ass hard, like there were tails there. It had been a month. The Dark Elves faithfully obeyed what I said. This area surprised me a little bit. Yihi wouldn't be negligent when guarding. Yihi always faithfully followed my commands. She would catch the slightest hint of a mistake, but they held on tenaciously. The dark elves proved their value. They would be quite useful as guard dogs. And I didn't just play for a month. I raised the achievements of the lightning god technique to 7 stars. I also studied Chrisley's interior and concluded that it was possible. Exactly 1 month afterwards, I fed Chrisley a bottle of elixir. A few days later, I could determine that Chrisley's appearance had changed as I led her to a moonlit place. Today was the full moon, the time with the most yin magic power. Chrisley's body was stiff with tension, a mixed-race dark skin. The contrast between the yellow skin and white hair looked good. The eyes an unusual soft purple. Her features had a sickly appearance, but she had a voluminous body. A beautiful woman that many people would focus on. I threw off my clothes. The ceremony would be conducted in the nude. We had carved each other's bodies for 1 month, and it would be combined on the last day. The ceremony was also needed in order to stabilize the magic power inside Chrisley's body. I looked Chrisley up and down and said, "Take it off." Chrisley's eyes became resolute. She was aware of her predicament. She succeeded in recovering some stamina due to the elixir, but the ice dragon's curse was unaffected. Instead, it actually gnawed away at her life force quicker. The other dark elves might not know, but Chrisley did. That was the reason why. Chrisley opened her mouth. "Dungeon Master, I want to say something." "What?" Chrisley looked at me with soft violet eyes. "My body isn't normal. I drank the elixir, but my status is getting worse. I have 5 or 6 months at best. My body is becoming as cold as ice. I can't comply with Dungeon Master's wishes." It made a lot of sense. In the first place, the elixir wasn't an absolute cure. She had received heaven's vengeance since she was born, so the elixir couldn't stop it. It would only increase her life by a few months at best. It seemed like she was giving in, so I asked, "Why are you asking me this? The Dungeon Master can give you an unlimited amount of elixirs." Then Chrisley shook her head. "I can't do something so disgraceful. And no matter how much I drink, the elixir can't cure my body." Wasn't Dungeon Master also aware of that fact before the ceremony? As a child, I dreamed of someone rescuing me, but I've already given up on that. This ceremony will only cause misfortune. I'm sorry to Elder Julium, but I can't meet your expectations. Then do you want the rest of the Dark Elves to die? Their lives will be collateral if you are useless. Chrisley's eyes widened at my words. It was an expression showing she would comply. "It is destiny." I frowned as it seemed like she had given up. Was she frustrated because her last hope, the elixir, failed? An attitude of meeting death. Her attitude was more like a worm than a cockroach. Chrisley saw my face and said, "Dungeon Master, we have also come from the demon world. That is a place defined by power. I know deep down that Dungeon Master has mercy. After Elder Julium deliberately hid me, he was forced by another demon elder to cut his hair and was ridiculed. Despite losing his old life, he promised you this ceremony in exchange for the elixir. I will return this favor." I was impressed with Chrisley. Not many demons would keep promises unless their life was at risk. Demons could be very cruel to those who were weak. But unlike ordinary demons, I could see the potential of others with mind's eye. However, those with high potential could still be weak. Those who were lacking right now could be a great help to me later. For those people, I would show them a wide generosity. A prime example was Chrisley in front of me. If it wasn't for Chrisley and Krasla's presence, then Julian would have died. Having them imitate a dog was troublesome. I smiled and opened my mouth. "How are you going to pay me back? Don't you have 5 or 6 months at best to live?" I am saying this with a smile. My body might be cold, but I am prepared. I am strong enough to undergo the ceremony. It is up to you. The ceremony was one of the most glorious moments in a dark elf's life. It was given to me. She was convinced that her time was running out. I didn't like that attitude towards death. Either way, I would go into the pit laughing. I didn't like her words. There was a need to correct her attitude towards death. I would fight desperately in the face of death. Chwak! I forcefully tore apart the thin silk dress that Chrisley was wearing. At the same time, her resilient breasts and body were revealed, but she did not resist. She had accepted the whole thing. I looked down at the breathtaking sight of Chrisley's body and said, I will help you live, so you will have to live for me. Today was the full moon. It was when yin magic power was the most powerful. In response, the inherent power of a dark elf in her power raised its head slightly. Even so, it was still lacking compared to the blood of the true demonic dragon, so balance was important. The lightning god technique had reached 7 stars. The amount of electric power was 6.4 million watts. It wasn't comparable to real lightning, but it would be introduced through skin contact. I placed my hands on Chrisley's body and slowly moved the lightning god. I wanted to see the areas where the yin magic power was blocked. I need to pierce through one. Originally, magic power would flow hot throughout a body. In contrast, I could feel a cold magic power. It also flowed slightly differently through her body. Chrisley's yin magic power was badly accumulated in some areas. After piercing through, a wide passage would appear before it was clogged again. I gently touched the yin magic power. Lightning god, it is your turn. The lightning snake in my abdomen. Its name was Lightning God. The lightning god twitched with annoyance, but moved into Chrisley's body. Chrisley, who was watching my actions, widened her eyes as she felt something entering her. Put up with it. Don't make a sound. Kwang, at that moment, the 6.4 million power of Lightning God arrived at the first gateway. Lightning God aggressively slammed its head into the first blockage. Chrisley's body trembled. Somehow she managed to suppress the groan as her fists clenched tightly. Her 10 toes scraped the ground. Her body bent like a bow as a cold sweat appeared, but she didn't make a sound. Tricky. My expression was also determined. Just before, the impact had failed to pierce through. I needed to drill through the first gateway, but I didn't know if Chrisley's body could hold on. But I couldn't wait until the next full moon. The magic of the dark elf was bursting, so today was the day. This was a golden opportunity to absorb some of the true demonic dragon's magic power. If I could at least surpass one gateway, it won't be easy. Don't let go of your spirit. I was unfamiliar with whispering sweet words to someone. The best I could do was to tell her to endure it. Chrisley nodded while biting her lips. Lightning God continued its barrage as its tail shook wildly. Kwang! A rough storm occurred. It looked even more painful as Chrisley's body twisted. But my hands didn't fall from Chrisley's body. Energy was leaking from her body. I was safe, but that wouldn't last long. If magic power flowed back from Chrisley's body, then I could receive a big wound. It was self-explanatory what would happen if I withdrew Lightning God now. My eyes became more serious. I had to see it through to the end once I started it. Chrisley couldn't regain her spirit. The unimaginable pain made her want to drift away. She thought she had become used to pain, but this was different. It felt like thousands of needles were inside her body. But she had to be patient. She also didn't make a sound. Honestly, any man would feel something in front of Chrisley, a feeling where they wanted to save her. She didn't have any hope. There were numerous attempts to save her. They all ended in frustration. The elixir had been her only hope, and even that failed. Therefore, Chrisley's heart had given up. Krasla, Opa, and Elder Julium had great expectations, but she wasn't expecting much. If there were fewer expectations, then she wouldn't be disappointed. And despite the elixir improving her status, she didn't say anything once it started deteriorating again. Their eyes would fill with sympathy. But this man, he didn't have any sympathy in his eye. Why? His eyes seemed to see through her. At first, she thought it was just an excuse to take her body. She was well aware that many demons wouldn't give up such a sweet ritual. It was impossible, but if the life of the clan was saved for the elixir, then she would spend what remained of her life devoted towards him. Is it possible? But the thought sprouted in her brain. A pain that a demon couldn't adapt to was serious. Kwang. Who? The pain was the only evidence that she was alive. She gave up and descended into the pain. The intense pain in her body made her feel strange. It was like every one of her cells was surviving a little bit more. Kwang, was she mistaken? The shock was painful. Rather, it was an awful pleasure. Her blood moved more quickly. It felt like the vitality in her body was fluctuating and spiking. Chrisley was convinced. The forbidden curse in her body had relaxed a little bit. Can I live? She threw a questioning look towards the demon. She wanted to do many things, but her body was too weak. She tried to say something, and with that joy and hope, Chrisley lost consciousness. The full moon shone. Moonlight flowed in an enclosed space. In the meantime, there was a noticeable change in Chrisley's appearance. Her pale complexion took on a dignified atmosphere, a body with an unparalleled beauty. Her expression also came alive. It was hard to believe she was the same person who had accepted death. The magic power of the true demonic dragon and dark elf was harmonized as much as possible. I smiled towards Chrisley, who was standing a little bit away from me. I carefully moved towards her delightful breasts. Then my mouth opened and my tongue caressed her chest. My tongue moved along the blood lines carved on Chrisley. I bit my tongue while it brushed against the blood marks. It was like a fuse had been lit. Usually my fingers would carve new marks, but today was the last day. The ceremony was different. My entire body was engraved with many blood marks. Chrisley's blood was needed for the ceremony. I felt a warmth in my chest and opened mind's eye. Name: Chrisley, occupation: none. Title: person with the blood of a true demonic dragon. Epic: intelligence 6, magic power 6. Blessed by the moon. XU, magic power 8. Stats: strength 23, intelligence 94, 6, agility 21, stamina 27, magic power 46 plus 14. Potential: 211 plus 24 is 78. Uniqueness: a person with the true demonic dragon Aujin and the dark elf Shilla's blood. The end of her growth can't be seen. Skill: none. Before and after comparison. Strength 19, intelligence 100, agility 21, stamina 1, magic 34, potential 176 plus 3, 478. Strength 23, intelligence 100, agility 21, stamina 27. Magic 60, potential 211 plus 28. Stamina and magic power had risen significantly. Her physical abilities were still low, but it was an incredible growth when looking at the past. Of course, I also went through changes. It was only a change to the lightning god technique. I stared with bitterness at my status window. Name: Randolph Briggseel, occupation Demon Earl, type Indomitable Warrior, XU, all stats 2, first to receive a fairy's blessing, U, magic power plus 6. Stats: strength 79 plus 9, intelligence 64 2, agility 74 plus 2, stamina 82, magic power 82 plus 8, potential 379 plus 23 500. Electric power, 6.4 megawatt. Uniqueness, Heart of the Hell. Monarch has been transplanted, Fullzinth hasn't been fully opened. Changes have occurred in the lightning god technique since swallowing a huge amount of magic power. The results are unpredictable. Skill. Skill combination are Mind's Eye XU, lightning god technique, Wrath epic. No stats increase or title. That damn snake had swallowed all the dragon and dark elf magic released from Chrisley. It was now lying underneath my belly button, looking like it was dead. Thanks to that, there were 3 question marks next to the lightning god technique skill. This was the first time I couldn't anticipate the results. Take this. I took out the command magic book and the death wand. Despite the blood marks engraved on my head, Chrisley was still puzzled by my behavior. Dungeon Master? What is this? A new occupation and skill and a wand for you to use. Chrisley's face filled with determination, and she said, I will learn it to the best of my ability. Learn it after you are fully recovered. Do you know how? Yes, I studied while under the contract with the dark spirits. I didn't bother explaining anymore. I noticed that Chrisley was having trouble balancing her body. She had been unsure of my intentions during the last month. After breaking through the first gateway, her attitude towards me had completely changed. I gave her hope. After escaping from her constraints, Chrisley changed completely. In addition, she seemed to have figured out my personality. Since the first day, Chrisley had never worked against me. Time to go out. It was time to leave the dungeon and return to the guild. I had been away for more than a month. I don't know how Lightning God technique will change, but I shrugged. It had already passed. Lightning God had absorbed all the magic power. I could only hope that it progressed in a good direction. I still looked at Chrisley. Chrisley's cheeks flushed. The ceremony wasn't over. Combining the bond was still required for the ceremony. Chrisley carefully put down the book and death wand and nodded. Her mind was prepared. I pulled Chrisley towards me. Then I devoured her lips. The ceremony ended the next day. I left the dungeon. Krasla was next to me. Dungeon Master, is it okay if I join you? Krasla asked under the intense sunlight. The pointed ears of a dark elf was hidden with the help of a magic earring. At first glance, his skin looked like a black man. Furthermore, the earring had the option of automatically translating every language. It wouldn't be an issue if Krasla accompanied him. Chrisley told me, "You have the role of a teacher among the dark elves." Krasla nodded at my words. "That's right. I've taught the dark elves basic swordsmanship and how to deal with some creatures. You will do the same now. You will teach my humans. I never learned from someone, so my teaching skills were embarrassingly bad. Someone was needed to teach Yu Unhai and the other awakened in my group. So I used Krasla. In addition, it wouldn't be bad if he was used as a member of my raid group. Krasla currently had no work to do in the dungeon anyway." Krasla's eyes widened and he clapped with an understanding expression. "The humans under you? Ah, you are playing?" "Similar. Right now, it was a game that couldn't be seen. The level of the humans were far too weak." Krasla's eyes lit up. "I understand. I won't interfere with Dungeon Master's game." After fixing Chrisley, the eyes of the dark elves had changed towards me. For them, Chrisley was the incarnation of a dark elf. Faith. Faith. So it would work. The dark elves would obey any decisions like they were my dogs. Krasla was the same as well. His true role was Chrisley's guard. He was happier than anyone that Chrisley was cured. In fact, Krasla was the one who tried hardest to imitate a dog during the previous month. Chrisley was more important than his pride as a warrior. He would die for her. Now his position was completely concluded. I said casually, "In the future, just call me Master." "I understand, Master." They both started descending the mountain.